Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the November edition of the Carlisle Community Forum. This is a very special day, a very special program. I woke up this morning wanting to stay in bed because we're taping this on Tuesday, November the 11th. It's raining and cold outside. It's just a dreary day. But I think that the topic we're going to discuss with our guest this morning will warm your hearts. Anyway, we have with us this morning Betty Lang, who is representing the Friends of the Carlisle Council on Aging, one of the founders. How many years, Betty?
Well, it's closing in on 20, I think.
20 years, yeah, that's terrific. And Angela Smith, who I think some of you know at this point. Angela is our outreach coordinator, program director, and our fearless leader, David Klein, executive director of the Carlisle Council on Aging, and our very special guest, Alex Glazer, who is, let me dish some dirt on Alex that you wouldn't know otherwise. Her father is our own Ruben Klickstein, my hero as the best volunteer in Carlisle. He's taping us as we speak, and the best crossing guard we've ever had in my recollection. Anyway, Alex is representing, she's president and CEO of an organization called New England Donor Services. And in this case, the donor in donor services is the gift of life, and you'll hear more about that as we come back to Alex in a few minutes. And David, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kerry. I just want to take a moment before we jump into our program with Alex to thank all the volunteers who yesterday morning helped us with the fourth running, or the fourth annual edition of this Council on Aging intergenerational road race, which the first 3 years we had held on Veterans Day, and yesterday, because Veterans Day was on Sunday, we held it on Monday morning, and it was a beautiful day. We've had declining enrollment in the races, but the people that were there really enjoyed themselves. It's heartening to see mothers and daughters and fathers and sons and sisters and brothers competing and having fun, and we have great help from our COA board members, who I so appreciate, and also our Friends of the COA board members, who are by extension COA board members, including Ruben and Nancy J. Seen and Abba Sengal and Jean Bagnashi and Donna McMullen. It's just, the list is endless, but we also had great volunteer help from some of the students from Carlisle Public Schools, some 8th graders who were putting in service time, and that was really helpful. And all around, it was a wonderful day. I was looking at race results from the past 4 years late last night, and the guy who won both road races, the 1 mile and the 5K, he entered both. Wow. His name's Aiden. He's 16 years old, but he entered this race 4 years ago, and he was 13, and you could see him slowly climb the rankings until now he's king. From a 13-year-old to a 16-year-old, so it's very interesting and gratifying in a certain way. I hope we can keep it going. I'm not quite sure, but we'll see. So thank you, everyone.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I was wondering how I didn't race this year, but I slept in again.
It was a good day. It was a good day for that, too.
It was a good day for sleeping in. But every year we get great reports from people who have had so much fun doing it. So, and the center of town couldn't have been dressed more appropriately this year either.
Absolutely, with the poppies. I want to do a shout out. As most everybody knows by this point, Deborah Bentley's done yeoman's work on with all the other volunteers, including Angela, for knitting those poppies and putting them out on the village green, and it is spectacular.
Yeah, they didn't just decide the night before, let's make some poppies for tomorrow.
That's right. When would you say this project started? 8 months ago?
Well, at least a year.
Oh, at least a year, okay. Yeah,
Terrific. Yeah. Well, our guest this morning is Boston Magazine just published their top 100 executives, female executives in town, and our guest is pretty high on that list as CEO and president of New England Donor Services. Now, The donor services in this case are organ donor services. And New England is one of 50 such organizations around the country, I believe, Alex.
Yes, that's right.
Each New England has an organization that focuses on the 200 or so hospitals here in the region, and then every state or part of a large state has its own group that looks very closely at the organ donor program nationwide. And they all coordinate somehow magically to get a database of qualified donors and qualified and needy donees. So I'm not going to get ahead of myself. Alex, tell us a little bit about what do you do every morning when you get up and
Right. Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for having me here. The system nationally is, as you described, a series of charitable nonprofit organizations that are designated by the federal government to serve a specific geographic area. And as you indicated, our organization here serves the 6 New England states. And our responsibilities and the responsibilities of all of the other organ procurement organizations nationwide are to manage the complex process of identifying potential organ donors, coordinating the organ donation itself, allocating the organs to the recipients who need them, and ensuring that we're also engaging the community in this activity, because it is such a unique corner of medicine that requires community participation. I mean, it's obvious, but I like to say that there can't be transplant without donors. And so we really need that engagement in order to make life-saving transplantation a reality. So what do I do when I get up in the morning, aside from get my 3 children squared away and off to school? It is highly variable, because part of what we work with in making these coordinated donations happen is unexpected events medically that lead to the possibility of organ donation, and the time period that we have to actually coordinate the recovery of donated organs and make sure that they're still viable for transplant is extremely short. So we work in critically short periods of time. Our organization is 24/7. And we have staff that are literally working all day, all night in shifts to make sure that we can save as many lives as possible through transplantation.
And I often think, that I only remember about this whole opportunity when I renew my driver's license. That seems like the only time that my memory is jogged that I can sign up and become an organ donor. And then I keep thinking, well, at my age, do they really want my old organs at my age?
Yes,
Why would
we
they
do.
want that?
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because what we like to say is don't rule yourself out. That actually the need is critical, and I think most people are aware that there's a need, that people die waiting, but there are in fact almost 115,000 people waiting in the U.S., and here in New England there's over 5,000. There are people that die waiting every day. Nationally, it's about 8 people die a day waiting. And so it is really important that we engage everyone in this activity. And you're not too old. Don't rule yourself out. In fact, last year in the U.S., almost 35% of the actual organ donors that saved lives through transplant were over 50. And that percent continues to grow as our population continues to age. And so combined with the need is also advances in medicine that allow for us to use organs for transplant that previously may not have been considered possible. And so that expands the pool of who could be a donor. And so if organ donation is a legacy that you want after your death, we urge you to register as a donor and not to rule yourself out. These standards change over time, and that assessment is made if and when you pass away in a manner that might be suitable. So how do you go about registering? Well, you mentioned that when you renew your license, and that remains an option. You can do that online or physically at the office when you do that renewal. But you can also go online anytime and go to registerme.org and sign up into the database that way. You can use your iPhone, and if you go to the health app in about 30 seconds, you can register as a donor through that avenue as well. So
Can
we're
you call
working.
Angela? Everybody just calls Angela.
You can call Angela, and then Angela can hopefully direct you to the right website. I think, what we're trying to do is give people as many tools as possible to say yes to organ donation and to help really address that need. And I think that it's important for people to know that as we've created all of these tools, it's making an impact. There are, and people are surprised to hear this, 150 million registered donors in the U.S. as of this
that's
past month.
Half the population and
It's-
probably most of the adult population.
Right. Well, it's about 50% of the adult population, and so we know that there's more we can do, but it's a great place to start. And here in New England, we're a little bit over the national average. Our increases in growth in transplantation have been significant over the past 5 years. Nationally, it's been about 25% increase, which is remarkable. And here locally, it's been about 65%. So it's making a difference, and it's important for people to know that too, that their decision is really making a life-saving difference for people in need.
You had mentioned that the standards have changed, that whereas
Right.
before you may not have qualified, now what's an example of something like that?
Great question. So one example is previously individuals who were positive for hepatitis would have been considered ruled out for transplantation at the time of their death. And with advances in medicine and the fact that hepatitis is now a treatable or even curable condition, those individuals are no longer excluded as possible donors. And that's a really significant difference, as hepatitis and the prevalence of that have increased significantly in our area here in New England, but nationally as well.
We always, David?
Well, along the same line as what you were asking, Carrie, because was really on my mind, and I've registered as a donor before, but I've always kind of had, as I've been getting older, I've had that question of whether I should still be doing it. And I guess further inquiry would be, let's say you had an issue, let's say you had a heart condition or something, does that mean that your other donor or other organs couldn't be useful for somebody?
Right, that's a great question. You may have a heart condition, but at time of your passing, your liver or your kidneys might be perfectly acceptable for transplant. And again, those assessments are part of what our organization does at that time. Mm-hmm. So we have clinical staff that do a full medical screen and function screens to make sure that the organs are determined which organs are suitable for transplantation. So again, don't rule yourself out.
Right.
And if this is a legacy that you want for yourself, this is your decision to make, and we ask that you remain registered.
Okay.
Once you
very-
register as a donor, say on your license, it stays registered, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So we are working to change some of the system defaults. You hear with behavioral science about how defaults that we create in our systems can really change outcomes. And so one of the things that we've identified is that in your licensure renewal process, previously, you would be asked every 5 years when you went to do your renewal whether you wanted to be a registered donor. But we don't need to keep asking individuals once they've said yes, and there's mechanisms for you to change your mind and to go online and remove yourself if you'd like to. But we don't have to ask the question every 5 years. So just last year, we got some legislation passed in Massachusetts to change that process so that now once you register, you'll remain registered unless you take yourself off the registry, which is great. That's a great example of a better system design.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
We've all seen programs, shoot-'em-up programs, Cops and Robbers, where someone's in a terrible car accident or a car crash, and that person immediately becomes a potential donor. But it doesn't really happen that way in real life, does it?
No, not quite. But what you're getting at is a really important point, which is there's a myth that if you indicate you want to be an organ donor, that maybe less will be done to save your life if you're in some sort of traumatic event. And that truly is a myth. And in fact, that the healthcare providers, that the first responders and in the emergency room, their sole responsibility is to try and save your life. And in fact, their efforts are compatible with organ donation, because if it turns out that they are unsuccessful in being able to save that life, those resuscitative efforts are what helps maintain the viability of the organs for transplant as well. And so there's a synergy there. It's not a conflict. And then I would also say, too, that actually only the individual staff of my organization and the similar organizations across the country have access to the donor registry. So at the time that there's a first responder or you're in the emergency room, those staff have no idea whether you've registered as a donor or not. And that's an important protection as well, I think, for perception.
So if I'm in the hospital and the outlook is not good, and I decide, or the physicians, my medical team decides that I need a donation, need something, how would they determine whether or not I qualify for that?
That's a great question, too. So just like there are organ procurement organizations designated to do this work, there are certain hospitals across the country designated as transplant centers. And no one will be surprised to hear that there are many of them here in Boston, as we have one of the best medical communities in the country, if not the world. Here in the Massachusetts area, we have a number of excellent transplant centers: Mass General, Brigham and Women's Hospital, UMass Memorial, Leahy, and Tufts Children's Hospital, Beth Israel Deaconess. I could keep going. But what you would do is you would be referred to a transplant center where they do a number of screens and assessments to see if you're an appropriate candidate for transplant, and then you're put on a list. And as we know, people wait a long time, and here in our region, an exceptionally long time, for transplantation. That list is managed at the national level, and organ allocation is done through national policy with priority that's based on a combination of what we call equity factors, like how long you've been waiting, and utility factors. How do we make sure that we use this precious gift to maximize the number of years, life years, that can be saved? And so we want to extend the organ donation gift to benefit as many individuals as possible and prioritize those that are sickest first. So there is an urgency, medical urgency factor. So those complex policies are managed at the national level. When my organization identifies a possible donor, then those donors' factors are added into a database that will make a match with a list in priority of patients who are candidates to receive that organ. The very first component of the match is biologic, blood type, for example. So that match happens first, and then the prioritization with the factors I described, and then it would be New England Donor Services here in this area that would allocate those organs according to the list, and then actually make sure that the organs go to the right patient. So it's a pretty complex operational process.
All the way around,
It's
everything
trains,
from
planes,
the,
and
from the policy
automobiles.
level to the implementation level
Yep.
to the qualification level. I mean, it's
There's, and time is critical, so we have an airplane that's at Hanscom Field that helps take the surgical teams where they need to go on time. And all those logistics are a component of what we do.
wow. Well, and I'm sure the families who are waiting for loved ones on the list are constantly scrutinizing that and saying, am I being treated fairly? And
Fairness and transparency are a huge component of donation and transplant. That kind of public trust component is absolutely necessary for the system to work. And it goes back to my earlier comment that you need community engagement for transplantation to even happen. So the idea of public trust and making sure the system is fair and transparent has always been a central component of the way the system is run. Every single organ allocation is audited, as it should be. So this is a highly regulated field, as it should be, to make sure that we can maintain that kind of public trust.
how is it funded?
That's a good question, too. So kidney transplantation is funded by Medicare, regardless of your age. If you're in need of a kidney transplant, then Medicare covers that. And that's one of the very few examples of coverage outside of the general sort of age qualification for Medicare. For other transplants, it's covered by private insurance. And so the insurance of the recipient pays for the costs of the transplant surgery, which includes the cost of coordinating the organ donation. Yeah.
Wow.
So I think, one piece that's really important to say is that none of this happens without the generosity of the donors and their families, that they really, it's a complete privilege to work in this field and see people give to others that they've never met, that they will never know, but they know who are in need. And so it's a very unique field in that regard, and really an honor to work in that kind of mission.
So what would you like to say to our audience?
Well, I'd like to say register.
Register?
And you can make a difference. There are many organs that are needed, and the average organ donor saves somewhere between 3 and 4 lives, plus additional tissues that are needed, corneas, skin, and bone. And that the circle of impact is great. So it might be one individual recipient, but it's their family, it's their colleagues, it's their town community that all benefit from extending their life in that way. So register as a donor, don't rule yourself out. And, we appreciate all of the support that we do get in the community with awareness and participation in events, or even like having me here today to make these comments.
Well,
Do you, sorry, Carrie, but maybe a question that you were going to ask, does the organ donation, New England Donation Services,
Yes.
tripping over my words, accept donations, or are there any fundraising, or, is there a mechanism for contributing?
Yeah, there is a mechanism to help support financially. We are fully operational, so we're not primarily a fundraising organization, but we do have a couple of great community fundraising activities. We do what's called a blue and green walk. Blue and green are the colors for Donate Life nationally. And we do a walk in the Boston area. It was in September. It was our first one here in the Boston area, and we had over 700 participants for the first shot, which was great. So we will be building that, and I would be happy to share with this group when we get close to doing that again next year. And then there are also other regional fundraising efforts that happen. And then there's also the ability to donate online through our website. And, again, we don't spend time soliciting affirmatively, but certainly we do sometimes get donations that way, and the money that is raised through those efforts is used exclusively for public education.
Mm-hmm.
So
and the website again is
it is NEDS.org.
NEDS, NewEnglandDonorServices.org.
That's right.
Are any of the people that donate still alive?
So, no, our organization exclusively coordinates deceased donation. So it's once the patient has been declared dead, and primarily using neurologic criteria, meaning brain death, and their body remains on a ventilator, that we're able to then coordinate organ donation. There is, however, also living kidney donation, and that is primarily coordinated through the transplant centers because the donor is a living patient. And so there are a lot of opportunities there to make a difference individually if you have a family member or a friend or a colleague that's in need, but also through some innovative techniques you may have read about called paired exchange, where they do a chain of kidney transplants. Let's say, for example, my father was in need of a kidney transplant, but I'm not compatible blood type, but I'm willing to be a donor. And then we find additional pairs with that same incompatibility, and using an algorithm we can then match up a chain reaction so that I might donate to you and your donor would donate to my father. And that way you can accomplish multiple transplants with that biologic incompatibility. So there is a lot of opportunity for living donation as well, but my organization really exclusively is coordinating deceased donation because it's a different clinical process.
You have enough on your plate.
We have enough on our plate. Yeah.
And the question about the future.
Yes.
We've all heard of being able to reproduce organs for transplant. How far along do you see that, and are you planning to integrate there?
Yes, absolutely. We are always looking at every possibility to put ourselves out of business. And I say that, as a joke, but not really, because our mission is to solve the need for transplantation and to eliminate deaths waiting. And so one of those ways is absolutely under work, which is to create not necessarily artificial organs, but actually using biologic material to grow organs that would be compatible with the eventual recipient. And that work is underway. It's not imminent that it would be ready for actual clinical use, but there are a number of examples that look promising, and I expect that eventually we'll get there. The other innovation that is closer to a reality is using devices to repair organs from a donor that are not transplantable or considered transplantable today, and repair them to the extent that they are transplantable. So you mentioned earlier, if you had a heart condition, maybe your heart's not appropriate for transplant at the time of your death. Well, what if we could take the heart, remove it from the donor, work on it through a medical device, and repair it to the extent that it's then transplantable? And there are clinical trials already underway for that exact purpose with hearts, lungs, and livers.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that will be soon.
Is there any age cutoff at all then?
Really not. I can tell you that it certainly becomes rare that we would have an organ donor who's over 80, but it's not impossible. And because one 80-year-old is not the same as another 80-year-old.
And what about on the reverse side?
And the
the
reverse side, you mean in terms of pediatric donation?
Yeah.
So no, there's, thankfully, there are not a lot of pediatric deceased donors, but there's also a smaller demand. But there are children who die waiting, so all the way newborn, all the way up. The other thing I would mention is that older donors are often able to donate things like corneas that can restore sight. And in fact, we have a sculpture from Bob Schur. He is the artist who did the bronze relief for the Ted Williams Tunnel and had done the FAO Schwartz teddy bear and other kind of iconic. So he had lost his sight through
Macular degeneration.
Yes, exactly. And had a cornea transplant a couple of decades ago, which enabled him to continue being an artist. And he speaks for us from time to time about that. So, it's not that it was a life-saving gift, but it was really a life-changing gift that then benefited all of us, that he could return to his craft. So those opportunities remain well into 90.
Great.
Yeah.
To Betty's question, back in the 1970s, when I lived in Ohio, I had a friend named Warren Harding III, President Harding's grandson, who was a gentleman farmer in Columbus and was raising pigs to a certain weight and size, hopefully that the hearts could be the same size as a human heart and the rejection phenomenon would be overcome over time. And he said, I won't see it in my lifetime, but
Right.
I'm still trying to make it happen. What's happening in that?
Yeah, I think that there's probably less promise in that than there is in growing organs using human tissue in terms of the incompatibility component. But we still rely on animal models to even get to the point of being able to do human clinical trials. So he was on to something, but it might have taken a little bit of a turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they do use, like, the
Va-
aortic
Valves.
valve. I mean, my husband's
Sure.
is a pig's
Right.
valve that
Right.
he has.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, we could spend much more time on this, and I know you have to leave, so we'll have to cut it short. But hopefully, everyone listening and watching has gotten the message about please register if you haven't, and consider registering if you haven't considered it. And it's such a absolutely wonderful thing that you're doing. We thank you for doing it and for doing it so well, and hope for continued success.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Angela?
All right. I'd just like to say we're looking forward to the holidays with a lot of events that are coming up, and we're going to hit on some of the highlights for December and early January, because I think by the time this is recorded, most of November's will be over. So let me just talk quickly about, we do have Neshoba Tech Lunch on the 12th of December, and on January 9th, we'll do the men's breakfast on December 13th. The monthly coffee will be this coming Monday, so you might miss that on 11/19. And on a 12/6, we'll do it again. And we're going to do senior moments on November 26th and December 10th. And we will also be doing lunch at the farm. We love to go to the Northeast Correctional Institute, and that will be on November 28th. So take a break from the holiday rush and enjoy yourself for a nice lunch. Our December lunch will be on December 5th, and we have a lovely daughter and mother musical pair that will be performing. And for our holiday lunch in December, when Santa will come and join us, we will have the high school choir as well, or not the high school, excuse me, the Carlisle Public School Choir, and another Chelmsford Crossing lunch on January 3rd. So I think that should give us a start, but maybe we could have Betty tell us about the Friends.
I'd be happy to tell you about the Friends. By now, you have all received the Carlisle Connection. May I point out page 3? It's a wonderful description of who the Friends are and what they do, where the money that you so gratefully give to us goes to. I'm not going to repeat it all. Some of you already know it, but I will ask you to take a look here, because people are not aware of how much the COA does and how much help the Friends, through your donations, mean to the COA organization. We are very busy now. We've got these board members, there are 11 of us, and we're putting them their nose right to the grindstone to get the flyers out for the annual fund drive. They'll be coming out just after Thanksgiving. You are so generous that I almost am embarrassed to say you are generous, because it comes every year, and the monies that come go to reinforce the budget monies that come from your tax dollar. The town can't afford all the programs that we have here in town. Transportation. If you can't drive, how do you get to your doctor? How do you get to groceries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And the Friends always support that. Transportation right now is a currently big deal in COA, is it not, David?
It very much is. As a matter of fact, tomorrow morning when we have the Friends meeting, it's one of the things I want to talk even
Yes.
further with you guys about.
And it's very exciting, because now at age 82, I will not be able to drive, not tomorrow, but in another 10 years or so. And I worry, because I love the town of Carlisle. It's home. And to hear these wonderful COA people talk about different ways to get us to be mobile, to be able to go where we want, to go to the museums, it's makes your life beautiful, much more beautiful. There are also the medical parts, too. There are clinics that the Friends support. And let's see, fuel assistance. I have had people say to me, friends of mine, that don't live in Carlisle. Fuel assistance? What do you need fuel assistance for in Carlisle? That's a rich community. Everybody's rich. And I take great pleasure in saying, you really don't know what you're talking about. And in a nice way. But that definitely is a very great need. And I want you to know that when you get the flyer and you make your donations, be sure to pay attention of the address to which you should send it. It is the Friends of the Council on Aging, Box 38, Carlisle, Massachusetts 01741. The Friends, once a year, at the instigation of the COA, support a grant. All the money that we receive in this current fund year, if David needs it all, David gets it all. And it amounts to around anywhere, David, from $25,000 to $18,000 a year, depending on the amount of money that you get. So I don't want you to think that the Friends are taking any travel trips to the Caribbean, because we're not. All this money goes directly to the COA. And I'm so grateful to be in this organization for so long. I just think it makes living in Carlisle so much more graceful. So please think about a donation. We'll be happy to receive it. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. I look at this list of donors from last year, and I've looked at it every year, to make sure my name was in it. And but I thought, I've written a check for several years, but it's always the same amount. I always write the check for the Friends. And it occurs to me that life doesn't happen that way.
No, it
costs of everything are going up. Wouldn't it be nice if everyone listening that so great generously have donated in the past, contributed in the past, wouldn't it be nice if you just added another $5 or $10 to that amount on your check, because it would really make a difference,
Yes.
right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
This is a good year to give.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Think about that. Well, thank you, Betty, for all that the Friends do. It's wonderful to have you as partners to the COA.
You got it.
Speaking of transportation, Angela reminded me when we were preparing for today that as we're entering the winter months, we have a transportation weather policy, winter weather policy, and in general, sometimes things happen on an ad hoc basis, but in general, if Carlisle Public School is canceled, all our events and rides will be canceled. If the Carlisle Public School is delayed because of snow or other weather emergency, then our events or rides would be before 10 a.m. would be canceled. But we would still make an effort to have our events that are after 10 in the morning. It gives this a chance to assess how things are going in the town and have the staff come in and see what's going on. So if you do see that the weather is really rough and are not sure, you could always call the COA office, and if we're there, we'll let you obviously make every effort to let you know what's going on.
And if we're not there, the voicemail will be updated to tell you what's on and what's off.
That's right. Angela is very diligent about that, and it's a big help. But we've got some things going on with transportation. We've got that Chinook grant that maybe people have heard about over the last couple of years that we're working on, that we're now in the implementation phase, and one of the projects is transportation related. So we'll see where that goes. But it could involve actually using Uber and Lyft. You might, for those of you who aren't too familiar with them, they're what they call ride sharing or transportation network companies, and fortunately or unfortunately, it's just the way things have evolved. Some cab and taxi companies have gone out of business because of the competition, but on the which is a negative. On the plus side, there are people who are actually being Uber and Lyft drivers for part of the day, And I know that people are skeptical about it, but if you have the Uber or Lyft app and you pulled out your phone and you looked in Carlisle, at any one time, there's 5 or 10 people driving around that are willing to give you a ride. So it's something that, we were bound to explore at some point, so we're trying to explore it sooner rather than later.
We also benefit from Lowell regional transportation services, and there are other regional approaches to sharing services and providing support for services that we have the opportunity to at least consider, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think you're referring to, Carrie, to Crosstown Connect, and I know it's something that I was just talking to Tim Goddard, Town Administrator Tim Goddard, about it a couple weeks ago, and I think that the town probably will, through the selectmen, take a look at whether it's viable for us to join and whether it's beneficial. I think over time, as people have pointed out to me, it does make sense to take advantage of regional opportunities, because sometimes regional groups get grants that we as a town wouldn't ordinarily get ourselves. So, but we'll see how that happens. And interestingly enough, it's not just the Council on Aging that one might benefit, but the schools are looking at the advantages as well. But we'll see. We've got a lot of. That's why we're looking at these things. That's why we keep our ears and eyes open, obviously.
Another really exciting thing that came from the Chinar grant is our ability to have a community service nurse. And next Monday, Tricia, and next Monday on November 19th, and then again on December 17th, she will be holding Ask a Nurse here in Town Hall. So if you are sitting out there and have a question you'd like to ask somebody in the medical field about, you just have to show up from 11 to 12. It's upstairs in the Nichols Conference Room. You don't need an appointment. You can just show up and say, I have these questions. So maybe it's something about a medication. Maybe it's something about some symptom you've had that you're concerned with. Whatever you'd like to talk to somebody in the medical field, we're lucky enough to have Tricia through this grant.
She'll probably take your blood pressure while you're there.
She could do that, and if not, she's at our men's breakfast on the third Thursday, and also at our Chelmsford Crossing lunches, which is usually the first Wednesday or Thursday of the month.
But Curry, speaking of ways to lower your blood pressure, we also have exercise programs, and we're going to be coming into a new quarterly session of our exercise programs. And for those who may not be familiar with them, they actually take place every single day of the week, weekdays, that is. On Mondays, we have a tap dancing class, which is held at FRS. No experience or partner required if you want to try it. And I should mention, as Angela has pointed out many times, that all of our classes can be tried for free, and find out whether you like it or not, and then you can join. And if you're only here for part of the session because you're going away, whether it's to parts further south or just having a trip or something like that, we'll prorate the cost of the classes. So our goal is to maintain the instructors, to not have the instructors leave. But our goal is not necessarily to maximize profit on the classes, just to have the instructors there so that everybody can enjoy them.
And we're lucky enough to have the Friends subsidize the classes so that we can keep the costs down.
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe we don't emphasize that enough. It's kind of an underrated part of what I value the grant for. I mean, it's easy, I shouldn't say it's easy to talk about fuel assistance and transportation. It's just that because they're obvious, but the exercise classes, we do have some funding from the town, and we do have some other funding that we get from the state, but the Friends grant is where I look to make sure that we're maintaining these exercise classes and some of the food events that we do, which are kind of the lifeblood of the things that we're doing. Mm-hmm. So that was Mondays, the tap dancing class. On Tuesdays, we have two classes. We have a Zumba Gold class in the morning, and that's held at St. Irene's. And then in the afternoon, there's another event class that's held in St. Irene's. It's a Tai Chi class, and that's at 12:30. I don't know if I mentioned that the Zumba Gold class is at 10:45. On Wednesdays, we have another yoga class. It's called Hatha Yoga, and that's held at Benfield. Farms, senior housing. If anybody hasn't been to Benfield's, it's a beautiful structure that the town constructed about 4 or 5 years ago. And we have a line dancing class, which is really popular, and that's held at St. Irene's. And that's in the afternoon. On Thursdays, we have fitness and cardio boost here at Town Hall. One's at 9:45 and the other's at 10:45, right here in the Clark Room where we're holding this recording. But on Fridays, also here at Town Hall, there's a really innovative class called SAMA, Senior Approach to Maintaining Agility. We have a special instructor, Sensei Sarah, who comes, and the program was originally started by her father, and so we're lucky to have that program as well.
David, are the most popular programs the cultural ones?
Well, I think that in Carlisle, looking at it since I'm not a Carlisle resident, I can say that's one of the things that sets Carlisle apart. I mean, there's other, believe me, in the COA world, we do try to give each other suggestions. So occasionally we'll get a good suggestion from another town, but as much as possible, I try to let other people know about what's good and going on that's good here in Carlisle, and that includes the Art Matters program, that includes the historical programs that we have, the music programs that we have in the fall. Professor Giannotti, Richard Travers, Gary Highlander, and in the spring program, the medical series, and
those events are open to everyone.
that's right. I mean, those are multi-generational, intergenerational, and really the only limiting factor is occasionally they're held at the library oftentimes, and they were done in conjunction with the Gleason Public Library. Sometimes they're oversubscribed, and sometimes we've even had to move them over to St. Irene. That's happened with Art Matters because it's well known that we get 80 or 90 people for that. So we hold it at St. Irene, even though we love holding these things at the library, and the library is so gracious in coordinating.
Angela, you mentioned the Ask a Nurse, but isn't there another health-related opportunity to get to your SHINE representative?
If you are looking, which is a good point, Carrie, thank you for bringing it up. Open enrollment for Medicare runs through December 7th. If you're not sure what to do and you'd like some advice, we do have a SHINE counselor, and you can call the COA office at 978-371-2895, and we'll have Clyde Kessel, who's our SHINE representative, give you a call back, and he will help you look at what your options are.
Is there another one scheduled?
No, but if somebody needs a copy of the slides, we can pass them on.
I only mention it because the cost of prescription drugs continues to rise, and if you're on 1 or 2 or 3 a day kind of drugs, you get to that 32 or 3,300 donut hole pretty quick, and so you may want to re-examine your
Yep.
options.
It's always important to relook at things because everybody's plans can change, and it's really a wise decision not to just assume that what you had last year is going to be the best plan for you this year. And if you don't feel comfortable going on to Medicare.gov, putting in your own prescriptions and seeing what comes out, you can do it with Clyde.
Thanks.
We know this personally, but countless people tell us how patient he is in working with them.
And how knowledgeable.
And how knowledgeable, right.
And we also want to tell people about a few other events coming up for the holidays. We have wreath making on December 3rd. And if anybody gets something for Christmas that they're really not them and they'd like to know what to do with it, they can bring it into the COA office and we'll use it for our January bingo. And we do have our social hour on the 19th of December and the 19th of November and the 10th of December. And we want to remind everyone that if you live alone, it's too easy to fall. So please consider getting an Are You OK phone call, and we can send you a form. The police will call you at a time that you choose, and if you're not home, you just give them a call so they won't be looking for you. But if you fall, they will try you, and if they don't reach you, they'll come and check on you. So we found that that has helped save people's lives. And without it, we've found that people have ended up on the floor for 4 days straight. So please don't take a risk if you live alone. Consider getting it. And I want to point out we have an elder law and estate planning session on December 4th with Eric Pritchard from Brown & Brown. So if anybody wants to look into what the changes are to elder law, come sign up with the COA office for a free session of information. And
What
we're
time
gonna-
is that on the 4th?
That is at 1:30 on the 4th, right at the library. So David, is there anything else you'd like to?
Well, we could emphasize that there's a podiatry clinic upcoming, November 5th and 6th by appointment. So, and that is partially funded through the Friends of the Carlisle Council on Aging. The cost is $25. It would otherwise be $35 because the Friends is paying 10 out of that $35 fee from the podiatrist. But she's a wonderful podiatrist, and that's a program that's been a success now for a number of years. And it's held at Benfield Farms. So call the COA, 978-371-2895, and let us know, and we'll slot you in for an appointment. Haircuts to Go, that's a program that occurs here also in the Clark Room. Suzanne Hickey and Georgia Triantifilis, am I pronouncing it right? Are two hairdressers that will cut hair for seniors for $10.50. And if you're interested in trying their services out, please call the Council on Aging. And actually, we did switch rooms
Right,
for that.
we're up
I
in
forgot.
the-
Now
we're
we're
up
up
in
in the healed room.
Healed, right.
Yeah, exactly. And we've also still got walking going on, believe it or not, both indoor and outdoor walking for as long as the, on the outdoor side, as long as the weather will permit. And the outside walking is held on Thursdays in November at 9:30 a.m., meeting up at Center Park for a walk. And the indoor walking will be held at the school. And people are asked to call the facilities department at 978-371-2279 after 4 p.m. the day before to see whether it's available.
Right. Or to make sure they open it.
Or to make
So-
sure they open it, right. And Betty mentioned, or Curry mentioned, blood pressure clinics. We have those blood pressure clinics at most of our food events. So, for example, the Chelmsford Crossing lunch or the regular COA lunch, or Senior Moments over at Fern's, we have blood pressure.
And we're very, very sad and would like to wish Joanne Willens well. Joanne, who has been our travel czarina, taking people far and near to restaurants, to other countries, to day trips, is moving to Newton. So we're very, very sad that we're losing her skills. And we're going to be wishing her well. And so if she's watching this, I hope she knows we're going to really miss her and thank her for the many, many years of her extraordinary amount of support and work. And although she's leaving, we're going to continue on without her. And Debbie's looking at various ways to fill the blanks that we have. And she had set up a Stelios lunch on December 10th, and that will go forward. But if you're out there and you'd say, oh, I'd like to help and coordinate some event, call Debbie Farrow on the transportation line at 978-371-6690, and we'll get you going.
Yeah, I think being a volunteer of the caliber of Joanne and several of the other people that we've mentioned along the way, it takes an extraordinary effort, but we want you to know that you're not in it alone. You're working in conjunction with the COA and the COA staff. So, we have a sense of what works and what doesn't work, and occasionally we try new things, but to see if these new things work well. But we kind of have an idea from past experience about how to do things. So, but anyway, we will miss Joanne, absolutely. She's done a wonderful job.
And we do have a meditation group that started up this last year that is on 1 p.m. at Benfield Farms every single Monday holidays or not, it's led by Tom Dunkers. And if you've never meditated, then give us a call at the COA and he will hold a special session before you're put in a group environment to meditate together. But people have really enjoyed his sessions, and we've had a lot of people that continue on. So we also have 2 knitting groups, and one is on the 3rd Thursday of the month, and it's to knit for the homeless in Boston. And then the Gleason Knitters, which is on the November 2nd and 16th and December 7th and 21st, which meets at the library at 10:15. And if you are 65 and you do not have an MBTA senior pass, we're trying to get enough people to have a session here. We have to have at least 15 people to have the MBTA allow us to hold a pass setting session. So just give us a call and we'll put you on the list, and we hope to have enough soon. We're a few short, so please call us. And Mary's Old does a book group, and we know that the people that read and like to discuss what they read meet once a month, and for December it's on the 3rd. So that's always got a good turnout. Anything else, David, that you have?
Well, I know that Patty Rousseau just wrapped up her Partners in Rhyme intergenerational poetry program at the high school, and she had contacted Angela and I about possibly rebooting one of her poetry groups for seniors right here in Carlisle. I believe she was held here in Town Hall. And so
Yeah.
we're going to look into that. If anybody's interested in joining a poetry group, I know we don't want to interfere with what Mary Zoll is doing, but this would be a supplement to that. So just let us know.
Right.
And lastly, I think we're getting short on time. I'd just like to remind people that we do loan medical equipment, and when we're short of medical equipment, we turn to the friends. And we've been buying a number of things like rollators and transport chairs, since they tend to be loaned out for long periods of time. And they've really made a difference in people's lives in terms of being able to get people to doctor's appointments and also move around their homes and just be out and about. And so we're very, very pleased. And Clyde Kessel, who's another amazing volunteer, is not only doing Shine, but he's in charge of our medical equipment, which, thanks to the Boy Scouts and Doug Stevenson's son and the selectmen's support, we've recently moved from the DPW shed over to Highlands basement. So we have a new place which makes getting the equipment in and out much easier. And so we're thrilled about that.
Now, you gave me a good segue, and I hope we have just a bit, because it's a story I'd like to tell. We have friends that we have seen for years and years, and we go back and forth to each other's houses. She can no longer walk, and we have a long path down our house. On a whim, I called town hall and I explained my problem. And she said, well, that's no problem. We keep not real wheelchairs, but chairs on wheels at the town office. And if it's available, you can have it, for the night and bring it back. And that said to me, one of the worst parts of growing old, I think, is not being able to socialize with your friends the way you always have. And you don't want to become lonely. And I thought this was a wonderful idea, and we'll use it and use it and use it. So I hope you'll take advantage of those wheelchairs for socialization at the town hall.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much. And Ruben, one of our volunteers extraordinary, you must be very proud. He's taping us as we speak and wrapping up. Very proud of your daughter, Alexandra Glazer, for her making a difference in this world. So you must be very proud. I commend you for that. Thank you all for having us into your home, and we'll see you next month.